Citizens of the Metaverse, welcome to the Crypto Gaming Institute podcast. My name is Ben, but that doesn't really matter because we are here with the one, the only co-founder of ChainGuardians. My man, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Ben. I was just saying that, pretty busy. Things don't kind of stop. It's pretty chaotic, but yeah, I'm well enough, and yeah, I appreciate you asking. How about yourself?
Oh, fantastic! It is quite an honor to be able to chat with you. I mean, you're definitely one of the movers and shifters of the metaverse and the crypto gaming world. So what you built is amazing. So yeah, let's dive in. I'd love to hear your story. How'd you get to where you are?
Wow. Yeah, I mean it's a long story, really. But I guess just as a kind of a whistle stop tour, prior to being involved in crypto, I did a variety of kind of jobs and stuff, like some kind of like communications and like sort of marketing stuff. Then I was a teacher as well for like 5 years. That was my most recent job prior to actually getting involved in crypto in 20 sort of well back late 2016, early 2017. I kind of found Decentraland, which I was really fascinated with, and I've been fairly heavily involved with that since that moment in time, which I'd argue is I think certainly the first decentralized metaverse, but maybe even arguably one of, if not the first metaverse. I guess you've got other virtual worlds you can talk about as well. So yeah, since 2017, I was involved there, and then in 2019, I was part of the team that founded ChainGuardians in January. So we were ideating through 2018, and then I guess the rest is history. So yeah.
So when you first got involved with crypto and Decentraland, what was the draw? What really brought you to that, and how did you actually get involved with it?
Yeah, so some really good questions. I mean, I found obviously crypto really interesting in general. So, like, trustlessness and permissionlessness and kind of the ability to kind of take control of one's own sort of financial freedom, if you like. And obviously, like everyone else, the kind of disruptive potential of decentralization, not just on like let's say the gaming layers at that time, but the possibilities for it to disrupt finance and social media, for example, and banking, everything really. But what really drew me to Decentraland was the fact that obviously I'd done a fair amount of learning at that point, and I found that traditional that let's say decentralization and all those beautiful concepts that we kind of are familiar with, there were a lot of years off, I think, from ever kind of making those, let's say, whole scale disruptions. And obviously I think that that's been exacerbated over the past year, but at that point it just felt like it were a long time away. I guess in hindsight it's what, 5 years on now, 4 years on from that point in time. But yeah, it felt a long time away. But what I did think was much closer, much more on the cards at that time was the disruption on gaming, because for me it was a real obvious thing that it was like, well, the idea of NFTs, and that they don't die and they're interoperable across games, and the idea that the community are in, like a huge part in driving that ecosystem and the economy. We're all, in my mind at that time, were like, wow, these are the answers to something that I think had been a problem in traditional gaming for a long time. I mean, people would obviously point to decentralization and the blockchain as that for all these other industries, but it just felt as though there was a little bit of there was always going to be a long time, because of the kind of the I'd say the extent of education required to truly grasp these ideologies. Whereas with gaming, I felt it was something that gamers would very quickly get on board with, and without a doubt could do so. So when I saw Decentraland and this idea of, like, the metaverse, I mean, it already drew to me, because I was an English teacher, and I fell in love with like Ready Player One, and before that Snow Crash, even before I heard of Decentraland. So it was like, okay, these guys are literally almost like trying to recreate the Ready Player One. I was like, I'm on board. It felt like it was an extension of gaming, or somehow there was an inextricable link between these ideas of gamified social layers within Decentraland and the metaverse and whatever. So that's really what hooked me in. So in terms of like the next steps was, I mean, I kind of missed the Terraformer event by literally a couple of days when I found it, so I was a bit wounded by that. But luckily, I didn't let that put me off. I stuck around and I got to know some really cool people within the ecosystem. What quickly became apparent to me was that these people within the Decentraland were all innovators, they were all entrepreneurs, they were all builders, they were all creators, they all shared a similar ideals to myself. And whether it be a developer, whether it be front end, back end web dev, or whether it be an educator, whether it be somebody within law or finance, these were all people who were kind of like, I would say, at the cusp of, let's say, the innovation within their respective fields. So I met lawyers, I met bankers, I met people from more of a hardcore coding background. Obviously, Decentraland were full of them, but they all shared this similar vision. So what I decided to do was to obviously network with these people, see what was happening, what was being built, what needed to happen to empower Decentraland to further develop. And yeah, it kind of all went from there. I got connected with some of the district leaders there because I had obviously skills in education, in content writing, in marketing, and various other aspects. So I just got involved in every which way I could. So consulting on like educational content and pedagogical tools within Decentraland University. I love the idea of like a persistent world environment where people could go and play poker like within Vegas City, because I was a big kind of poker player at that time as well. I really enjoyed that too. So I think it was just all that kind of melting pot coming together really, and that's what sort of drew me in.
What I love about that is that part of your story is you went from being an English teacher to then transforming, and like you took the skills that you had and then you transformed that into a career within the metaverse. That to me is inspiring as hell. Like I feel like there's so many people who have different skill sets and they may not see they're not a programmer. So they're like, I'm not exactly sure how I can fit in with this whole wave, but you're living, breathing proof that it can be done. So when you got into there into that network, you started to see, okay, this is the opportunity. Did you pick one specific like group to work with and you just kind of were like, all right, I'm throwing in with these people and I'm going with them? Or did you kind of scatter about and look for a bunch of different things? And the reason I'm asking is people ask me all the time, how do I get started in crypto gaming? And I'm a little torn between, okay, pick one and go hard, or pick a bunch and kind of be part of all of them. So in the spirit of that, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, there's two questions. I guess they're sort of rolled into one, which is, how do I get involved in the metaverse in terms of, let's say, a career or aspirations for a career? Or then there's the how do I get involved with the metaverse and crypto gaming from a user perspective and get involved in that. And sometimes, more often than not, I'd say in 80% of cases, getting involved from the user perspective can lead towards the career side of things as well. Because one of the main challenges from, let's say a founder's perspective in terms of recruitment for ourselves is, if you're taking somebody from a traditional world with a really, high set of skills, there's always a period of education around the blockchain and decentralization and Web3 and all that sort of stuff. So you've kind of already got a foot up there from somebody whom is getting plucked from the traditional employment world, let's say, than they have, because it's a case of, if you've already kind of educated yourself on all these principles and you understand the space in which you're looking to operate, if you then have any skills from any of these traditional places, that as a co-founder, you're more confident that 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 they will hit the ground running when they start to work with you for a start. So I think that from that perspective, it's always good to be involved if you are aspiring to find a career within the metaverse or crypto gaming or anywhere else in blockchain for that matter. In terms of like whether or not it's more logical to do a scattergun or let's say an extreme focused approach, it's a difficult question to answer, because for me it was really straightforward, because there was only Decentraland. That was it, you know. And there was alongside it, that was the only metaverse anyway. And then alongside that, in the crypto game side, you had like maybe 3 or 4, like that. That was it. And that was in part what inspired myself and my co-founders to actually found ChainGuardians at that time, was that we felt there was a gap in the market, and that's what we kind of went for. But there was only really like Axie. There was one called Chainbreakers around at that time, which sadly they kind of, before the whole GameFi wave hit, they kind of, ran out of funding, I think. There was 1 or 2 others, like it was called Ethereum back then. It's sort of rebranded and renamed now as a different entity. And I think My Crypto Heroes was another. There may have been 1 or 2 that I'm doing a bit of a disservice for there, but there was only, say, 4 or 5, no more than 10, I would say, at that time. So there wasn't a huge breadth of decisions to make. Nowadays, there's huge amounts of GameFi projects at market, obviously. So users probably have a bit more of a decision about where to spend their time. And there's obviously like positives and probably negatives in that, whichever way you want to look about it. So if you're a user, it's difficult for me to kind of give that like advice, because my experience was slightly different. But if it were me and I was coming to the space now, and I had aspirations to be involved from a career point of view, I would probably, focus my attentions on a couple of ecosystems and learn them really, really well, as opposed to just kind of, going here, there, and everywhere. But on the flip side of that, if I'm a user and I'm looking to, let's say, utilize the play to earns or whatever, I might play multiple, GameFi projects, and basically get to know different metaverses before deciding where I want to spend most of my time. I think it's logical for anything in life, right? So, I think hopefully that answers the question.
Totally. So basically, what I'm hearing is, from a career perspective, to get familiar with a few ecosystems and really learn the ecosystems, and then actually take a step back. It's important to learn and educate yourself before you then go into the career path, because kind of like what you were saying, if you have the option to choose between 2 people with the same, let's say, copywriting skills, but one of them knows what MetaMask is and they know how to bridge and do transactions, the other one's like, what the hell's a MetaMask? Like,
Yeah.
it's almost, I mean, they almost could be a lesser copywriter by a certain extent, but because they've already shown the initiative and gone down that path, it's just easier to onboard from like a biz ops perspective.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head, basically. And I think um, this is kind of why, like, and especially now with how big kind of blockchain the industry is getting, and how much more wealth is flooding into the market, and innovation, and the speed in which innovation is occurring. I think it's without a doubt, just, if you've got some skills, whether it's like marketing, content writing, artistry, whether it's, people, and you're good at managing people and discussing with people, from a community building perspective, social media management, finance, gaming economies, game design, game developers, that, this is just in a nutshell. You've got like testing, auditors. There's just like so much opportunity within the space. But if you're somebody who is not familiar with decentralization, with the blockchain, with Web3, it's harder for you to get in there, because if there's 2 people that are, going for the same role, it's like you might have, like you said, the better copywriting skills, but it's going to take me far longer, as from a co-founder's perspective here. Look at these 2 people. Somebody's got amazing copywriting skills, but no, blockchain knowledge, or somebody who's got, good blockchain knowledge, but only, let's say, average copywriting skills. I'd take the one with the good blockchain knowledge, because it'd be far easier for me to train somebody up as a copywriter to get those better skills than it would be the other way around.
Totally. And then from the gamer's perspective, to just close that loop, it totally seems like it makes sense to play a couple games, and even from the perspective of, let me hedge my bets on different ecosystems. You could play games that live on different chains. So if something happens to one, you can always go to the other, so on and so forth. So when you identified the gap in the market, jumping back to your history now, and you're like, okay, I want to co-found this thing. I want to start it up. What were the actual steps that you took to go from idea to like, okay, now we have something that is launched? And really, I'm interested in like, how did you get the people together? How did you build out like the ownership of all that, and think through all those things, and survive that whole that time?
Yeah, there's some really good questions there. I mean, so I guess it really started with like myself and my other co-founder. We were playing blockchain games, a couple of the early blockchain games at the time together, and it we were kind of, we loved the concept of blockchain gaming. We loved NFTs. We were collecting and whatever else. But for us, it felt as though as blockchain gaming was then, it was never going to disrupt the traditional gaming market. So it was a big game, but in 2019, that was what ChainGuardians was about. We kind of, let's say, refined the angle from what we'd seen so far in the market. Or so basically, it was just a case of playing, and the pain points we felt with playing, or the things that weren't satisfying us. That's where we started to, form the idea. And it was almost like an off the cusp comment at one point in time where we were playing these games to my now co-founder Idom, because we were making some deals over a game we were playing, trading NFTs. And I was like, we were talking about some of the friction points in one of the games we were playing, and I off the cusp, I kind of went, you know what, God, I feel like we could do this better. And he was like, oh yeah, you put your money where your mouth is, blah blah blah. So it kind of started like that, and then as the idea sort of evolved from there, it was like, well, what would you call it? I'm like, I don't know, what would you call it, and whatever. And we wanted to create we wanted to create basically, the idea was all centered on blockchain superheroes. It was like we wanted to create superhero characters for different blockchains. That's where it came from, and that is where the ChainGuardians came from. The defenders of these chains. So we was looking to almost gamify the the open metaverse, as I would refer to it now, by giving each of these chains their own guardian, and then have them combat one another and all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of where it stemmed from. It was like, playing something, these things are wrong with this. What would we do to fix it? Could we do that to fix it? What would, and then the process from there was like identify, okay, if we're serious about this, what steps would we need to put into place in order to get a team together to enable us to do this. So it started really with like myself and my co-founder Idom. And what I didn't know at that time was actually, despite playing games with him for quite a while, was that actually he had a background in like basically working for a variety of Fortune 500 companies in a tech capacity. So he was a manager at Microsoft Xbox and also worked for AMD. I was like, oh shit, okay, cool. He didn't know about me was that, like, I was an educator. I had like writing skills, storytelling skills, and all that. So naturally, it was like I started to kind of do a bit of world building, character creation, and he started to idea like the NFT side and how we'd create these NFTs. And at that stage, he recommended that it was a problem solving thing, was that we had nobody who had like me and him at that stage. We had no project management or, let's say, finance experience. And he was like, well, I know my sister, which is Emma, our third co-founder and CEO. It was like, she's been project manager for Canadian Bank for the last 20 years, and she's also a certified accountant, so she can cover that side. It was like, great, okay, sorted, founding team in place at that point. And it just sort of spiraled from there. Emma was like, oh yeah, you want to create these superhero characters? Well, my wife's best friend creates characters for Marvel and DC Comics. Check these out. We were like, holy, these are awesome, and that turns out to be Noy, who is now our chief creative officer, and is responsible for all the designs and creations. And so he was creating the NFTs. We knew like blockchain engineers through the networks that we had already created, so we got somebody on. They created the NFTs. We then started obviously speaking to other community members that we knew that were playing the early games, saying, we're going to start this idea. They started to, they purchased some of the early NFTs to show us support and stuff, which got us a little bit of funding in the door. And then we were able to hire a web developer and whatever else. And yeah, kind of just went from there, from a 2-3 man team all the way to now having about 50 employees.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So when you were building this out and you were thinking through like, okay, we have these couple of core team members, we know we need some sort of funding, we know we need to get programmers. What I find interesting is you almost start from like the content and the business side, and it seems like the programming came later on, and all the development came. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but that came a little bit later. Um, how did you get something out of the door without having a programmer and development? Like, how did you get something to the point where people would actually invest in it at that point?
I think the first instance is obviously, it's like if you look at 99% of projects that launch now, they sell an idea. Might be a white paper with a few nice pieces of concept art, some tokenomics and a concept, but they don't really have anything. I'm not going to throw shade on any particular projects here, but a lot of the GameFi and Metaverse projects that we see launching right now, they have nothing. They have a little bit of concept art, or they've outsourced the creation of a video to a studio, or they have, bought some assets from some storefronts for $50 and then presented them as their own. And I'm not going to talk about any projects in particular, but that's the reality of it, right? You sell the idea. Now, the difference was for us back then, it was that we kind of, we already had original designs, and the first thing that we did was we injected some founders seed funding. So basically, through trades or whatever, like for me, when I first got involved, I literally 90% of my funds I just poured into Decentraland, and the other 10% I chucked into a few what you'd call poo coins. A couple of them did pretty well during the bull market of 2017, and I just kind of like banked that in a stable, and then me, Emma, and Idon just basically chucked in like 20-25K in each to get some funding in. So you almost need to have I think everyone needs just a little bit just to get those really key staff in. So with that, we're more than that actually. We're probably about 50K. I can't remember the number. It's like been like 4 years now, but the point being that we needed a little bit of capital to get those really core staff in, namely the programmers. So, we were able to get the blockchain engineer on to do the smart contracts that allowed us to do some of the initial NFT sales. Those initial NFT sales then basically allowed us to have a bit of further funding, and we could hire a web dev, and we got us first game developers on board, and whatever else. So it was just a case of really careful financial management, I think, from the initial sort of seed funding.
Do you think, and I do want to jump back, but to kind of bring us to present day for a second, do you think that it's a good idea to go out and kind of raise money based on an idea, or do you think it should be more where the founders put in what they can to just get things up and running off the ground?
I think it really depends. I don't like to basically say that there's a right or a wrong way. My preference is to see a proof of concept in a product before any sort of fundraising is occurring. I would like to see that, because then that just demonstrates that the team is capable of delivering what they say they're going to deliver. Now, the reality of it is that, there's some ideas that are too big that you can't produce even really a proof of concept, because it's just going to take so much money even to produce that like that proof of concept. So there's certain projects where I go, you're fair enough, you've raised this money without having a proof of concept because the idea is so big, and in that way it's like I understand that angle. But for many of the projects, it's kind of like the ideas are fairly small. Really, you're just looking to produce a new, let's say, overlay here on this DeFi principle, or you're looking to reskin this game here for this GameFi project. So, can you not just like basically show a proof of concept? We didn't do our raise for the token, and we'd been building for 2-3 years before doing the token raise. And by that point, we had an NFT mining platform, we had the RPG, and another product basically in development. So, and that was all from that initial kind of capital. Now, if you're in the blockchain space, it's highly likely that you've got some sort of capital that if you believe in your idea, you can push a little bit in to get a proof of concept off the ground. We're not talking hundreds of thousands here. I was a teacher, like my I was a modest lifestyle, but I believed in what I was doing, so I put basically whatever free capital I had into this, so that's I hope that sort of answers the question. I think it really depends on the size of the idea, and if you're looking to raise capital just based off the idea, what you're presenting should really demonstrate that you've got a really top quality team capable of delivering that, the fundamentals of that team all buy into the idea, and B, that you've demonstrated that through the content that you've shared enough so that the community can get behind you.
I love that. I love that. So let's actually hop back, and I kind of want to dig through those couple of years between you put in some seed capital, you sold some NFTs, generated more capital, you have your engineers, you're starting to build out a lot of different things, and then when you launch the coin, like what happened between then, and how did you know that it was the right time to launch the coin?
I think we'd got to a stage in the project where it was kind of like it reached how do I say, like a crunch point where it was like, we had this amount of funding which could keep the project going without doing the token raise, but if we wanted to scale and kind of push out the different products that we had in ideation, and that we wanted to kind of do so, it was clear that we needed to raise some further capital to enable us to bring on more stuff comfortably, both in knowing that the project still had, let's say, enough bandwidth to pay its staff, and obviously to offer staff with high skill sets that security that their livelihoods weren't on a 1 month or 6 month or 12-month kind of like lifespan with no guarantees. That by basically scaling and doing that raise, it enabled us to, let's say, offer much like more security for the people who were believing otherwise very good, promising, lucrative in some cases roles, to have the faith to come work with us, basically. So I think it was at that stage where we kind of like had key talent that were interested, but we couldn't, let's say, entice them enough because the security wasn't quite high enough. Whereas now, because of the let's say the project security financially, we're able to really kind of draw those people, those top talents in as well, and give them that sort of like peace of mind that they know that in a month's time they're not worried that they're not going to have more work with us.
I love that. So it seems like it was at the point where you were doing fine, but if you really wanted to expand into what you wanted to do, and to do so, giving confidence to your team that they were going to be in this for the long term, that you were in this for the long term, you're like, all right, let's raise some capital, let's launch a token. And so when you were thinking through that, and then you're like, all right, we're going to launch, how did you design your tokenomics? And like, what are, maybe you could break that down for us, like how did you think through that and actually design that, and why?
Yeah, I think for us it was a case of we were always creating a blockchain game, and from our perspective, it was like, the idea behind the blockchain game was that there were always supposed to be this ability to earn the token. So there was like in that case, even in sort of like 2018, the idea of play to earn was there. It was nothing new. Like, it's nothing new over the last year. All blockchain gaming projects that launched around that time were all looking and going, we want to basically have the ability for users to earn the token. It was clear that even when the project was launched at that time, from our perspective, that there would be a token. It was just it wasn't launched earlier because from our perspective, there was it was just kind of post 2017 ICO phase where there were just so many scams going on, like, and we just didn't feel like it was the right time or was comfortable, and the product wasn't in our sort of to make us feel comfortable. It wasn't developed enough to release the token into that at that moment in time, for a number of reasons, like, you know, from the ecosystem design, from the security perspective of the game, you know, from the kind of the let's say the collective unconsciousness around the 2017 ICO and let's say new projects raising money and how people were reacting to that. So there were just like a lot of reasons why it was always kind of put on the back burner. But the idea of playing to earn the token was always there. So it wasn't like when it came to the point in time where we were like, right, now's the time, you know, to scale the product. It wasn't like something that we'd never thought of, if that makes sense. We already had a foundation of how we wanted the ecosystem to look and work. So it was just a case of basically hashing that out some more, deciding on, you know, basically beyond the potential to earn the token, what other utility and functionality we was going to build into it. And obviously, being blockchain gamers ourselves, a massive part of that from our perspective was the ability for, you know, community-driven decision making. So we wanted it to be, you know, responsible for the governance as well. And from there, really, those were the main things. You know, the facilitation of buying and selling NFTs. We were always had this idea of creating our own marketplace as well, because Ethereum, which you played back then, had it. Decentralands were coming, and so on and so forth. So like to mitigate the fees, to govern, to earn, and to buy and sell NFTs with, that was always there, kind of really. We didn't have to do much behind that. It would just basically fleshing out how and where it, you know, that would sort of work and fit in, and mapping out the design, user journeys, and so on and so forth. And then anything else we wanted to continue to build in on top of that has been a case of, like, you know, teams ideation, obvious gaps in where, you know, we can create more demand for the token, or it would be better served for the community here and there. So yeah, that hopefully that's kind of answered that question.
Totally. So kind of a couple follow-ups there. When you're thinking about actually building the token, what I'm seeing a lot is the effects of inflation and just minting and using those tokens to reward users, but then the overall value of each token drops because they're not able to create enough buy pressure, they're not burning enough, so on and so forth. So how did you think that issue through, and how have you been able to solve that with your own ecosystem?
So honestly, I would say anybody who says that they've solved that problem is lying. Like, no one has solved that problem yet. Not one project. I mean, Axie have made a fairly solid design, clearly, since their success. I guess it hasn't stood the test of time yet. You know, there's a lot of analysis goes on about Axie's model. It says, well, you know, is this sustainable? I know that Axie's earnings have gone down fairly significantly as well over recent months, from what I understand. And this is not just, you know, again, this is not speaking ill of Axie. I never would. I've met Alexander and I know some of the other team there, and what they've done there is phenomenal, and all hats off to them, and I'm really pleased for the success. But what I'm trying to say is that there's nobody that can turn around and claim to say we've solved the play to earn tokenomics model. They just haven't. So we have our own ideas about how the ecosystem design will work, but principally it's centered upon the idea that it's not just a case of just having, let's say, one functionality for the token, which is solely like within the game. It's about building the utility of the token up within across the entirety of the ecosystem that we've got. So it's not just a case of you know, you earn the token in the RPG. You know, staking is coming, where users can stake CGG. They can earn fractionalized NFTs and get NFTs, in which case they can basically compound and earn more CGG from the game. So that's part of it. we've got, for example, something that we're implementing called NFT deaths, which is designed to offset the how much a user can play. As basically has users' characters can die, and they have to revive them with CGG related items, basically driving value back through the marketplace. So we take a percentage of the fees that occur there, and that'll go back into the reward pool as well. Then giving it utility with Chain Boost. So Chain Boost users know that if they hold CGG, then they'll get more chance of getting future IDOs for new projects at launching. There's loads of little micro, I like them, call them closed loop sort of micro transactions, which are occurring, which are designed to, let's say, consistently replenish that reward pool. But whether to be quite frank, the big test will be that when we turn on the CGG earnings in the game, because that's been, I would say, we're hoping to have like at least a soft rollout for that in sort of by mid to end of Jan, hoping that will really sort of prove whether that theory works or not. And honestly, the truth of the matter is that we'll be doing obviously a lot of data analysis, a lot of monitoring, a lot of problem solving at that stage. And if it doesn't work, what we can then look at is, like, for example, the dual token model as well, and see if that works as well, like Axie have done, or if we can get more success with that. And also, we need to look at, for example, the impact of the Metaverse that we'll be releasing, which will also be underpinned by CGG as well, and how that impacts, because it might be just getting to a stage where we're creating a rod for his own back, in the fact that there's all this utility and functionality for CGG, buying and selling here, there, and everywhere, that the truth of it is it might be difficult to monitor where CGG is being bought and entering the ecosystem, and where CGG is being earned and leaving the ecosystem. So it might be that no matter what we do here, there might be a time where we need to implement a second token, just to essentially allow us to reflect on and analyze the utility of the tokens, and how and where they're utilized. Hopefully that answers.
I actually think that was one of the best answers thus far, is that, hey, we're still early. We have our own thesis on how to combat this and do this the best. But until we test it and just see what happens, there's no way to really know until we get there. I actually think that that's the right way to go about it. It's like, you have your thesis. Clearly what you've been doing is working so far. So I think it's highly likely that somebody who's been successful thus far in the space is going to be the one to figure it out. Somebody random who's coming, from somewhere else is, any and all solutions are welcome, but just the likelihood is probably going to, yeah. So anyways, so you have your token and you're building, you now are expanding, you have multiple projects, all kind of within this ecosystem. It's a lot. And I think it would be worth just a couple of minutes to maybe break it down for us, so we can understand, like, okay, what exactly is the totality of the ecosystem? How do each of the different cogs of the machine work? That to me would be really fascinating.
Yeah, of course. And just to really quickly touch on the previous point as well, I think if the tokenomics work for the CGG token in terms of how I've just described it for our project, that doesn't mean to say it'll work in another ecosystem, because the ChainGuardians ecosystem is unique, because and just to lead this into your next point, because there's different products and facets to the ecosystem. It's not just a game in isolation. So if somebody just comes with a game in isolation, it's like, oh, we're going to replicate what ChainGuardians does or has done. That doesn't mean it'll work, because you might not have these other products. Exactly, right? And I'm not saying, oh, that's because we're amazing. I'm just saying that if you're a game in isolation,
I'm saying that.
appreciate that. But if you're just a game in isolation, and you don't have buy pressure from your staking them and your mining, or you don't have buy pressure from your launch pad and your incubator protocol, the Metaverse or whatever it may be, then you've got a different problem to solve than the one that we have to solve, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly as well, because obviously Axie have solved the problem that they had with their token model, and that works for them. But that wouldn't work necessarily for ChainGuardians either, because their model is based around lots of NFTs selling. And NFTs consistently getting inflated. We have low mint, low scarcity of NFTs, so that model can't possibly work for us, if that makes sense. So it's just, every GameFi project has their own tokenomics problems to solve. Is the point we're getting at. But just to lead that into your next question, I guess that sort of lends itself nicely, is that we do, I'd say the ChainGuardians ecosystem at this stage has essentially evolved into having a number of different products. So initially, obviously, the game was launched as an RPG with the idea of it being future play to earn. And as the team developed and expanded, we also created the NFT mining platform, which was, this idea of an idle mini game where you could stake your NFTs to earn what would be the token that would be released in the future as well. And at that time, they were earning an off-chain currency pending redemption in the future. And that was that was created completely from scratch, completely original idea to our knowledge, because we were looking at some of the problems that other blockchain games were facing. Ironically, Axie was one of them, with these hyperinflating NFTs and not enough buy pressure, so the value was just plummeting. And lots of other of the blockchain games at that time were all based on that similar principle, was that lots of breeding, lots more NFTs created, and so on and so forth. That's where our low scarcity of NFTs came from, as an answer to that, for example, going all the way back to the why did you create the ChainGuardians? So now ChainGuardians has not just become the RPG, it's got the NFT mining platform in itself. Really, the idea is to rebrand that, release that completely as its own product, offer business to business services, and so on and so forth. Because we get a lot of projects come to us and go, can we put the NFTs on the platform? Because, we've got no utility for our NFTs. And we'll let our users earn our token, and they want custom solutions for their NFTs and tokens only, so on. So ChainGuardians started RPG NFT mining, but since that time as well, essentially within the umbrella or a sister company, Chain Boost, which fundamentally has some of the same staff working, but is kind of managed separately. Also utilizes the CGG token and is within, let's say, the umbrella or within the network of entities. And that's a Launchpad incubator protocol for GameFi and NFT projects. Chain Boost was mainly launched as a result of, let's say, our reflections or the ChainGuardians management team's reflections of the friction points within our own IDO process, and again thinking, how can we rework some of the challenges we felt that were in the launching industry around public sale participants and contributors getting an allocation and then just flipping it for like a 5 or 10x, when actually what you want is you want to grow the community and get them with you long term. So that was what Chain Boost was all about, trying to realign those incentives for users. And finally, obviously one of the other main products, which had kind of been ideating for some time, in my mind, ever since ChainGuardians was started, I always envisioned it as a 3D metaverse, as a 3D universe. That's where the cryptoverse came from. But it was a case of, at that time, I felt like the metaverse was still very early as well. And it was always a case of, in time, we would look to build that product. I actually felt like we had another sort of 3-4 years before the rest of the world cottoned on to how amazing the potential of the metaverse was. But apparently I got that timing slightly off. So we, again, I would say about 9-10 months ago, started ideating our own metaverse. And over the last sort of 5-6 months, we've exacerbated the employment of the team and the fundraising for the metaverse behind closed doors. And that's the final, let's say, again, managed it's its own entity, but again, within the CGG family is the final product. And I would say that each product has its kind of own team, and like obviously there's kind of crossover within the management to some extent, but for the most part they all have their own team. They're all managed kind of separately, but also there's a synergy between all of the products because of the utilization of the same token at this stage too.
That's amazing, amazing, amazing. I'm so excited for when the final product, the final game comes out. That's going to be mega cool. I can't wait to see. For people who obviously a lot of people are very excited about the project. I'm sure tons and tons of people want to join your team or be a part of it and or get more involved in the ecosystem. Like how if somebody's dream is to work with you and your team, how do they do that? And how or if maybe that's there's a vetting process there they have to go through and formal applications and all that stuff. So maybe like a good on ramp to get into the ecosystem or kind of where to start.
Yeah, really good questions. I mean, I guess first and foremost, it's really nice to see people involved in the ecosystem. I mean, I don't get, sadly, I just don't have enough time, hours in the day to always be responding in the community channels. But I make it a habit of myself to when I get in bed at night, and it's usually quite late, 11 or 12 or whatever it may be, I try and watch half a film or read a bit of a book. um, I make a habit of just scrolling through the community channels and just seeing who's kind of been around, who's been posting. So if let's say for example we put a job advertisement out and someone applies, then I would see that name and that would automatically ring bells. And that's also like a nice let's say it's a nice way to I would say put uh, put yourself out there a bit, stand out a little bit. It's just to be active and involved and positive. I mean, we Ben and the marketing and the CM team have worked really hard, really hard at building a positive culture because there's so many communities in the crypto space which sadly just don't have like that positivity. They're often quite negative and got a lot of, let's say, FUD. And I think it's just such a breath of fresh air that within our community, that everybody is just amazingly positive, and 99% of it, obviously, we get constructive criticism, which is great as long as it's done in the right way. We welcome that, but 99% is positive in terms of even if it's constructive feedback, it comes in across positively or it's phrased positively. So I think that being involved and being active within that community will go a long way. And then of course I think that we are still we're putting out more job advertisements because we are a growing company. If one of those suits your skills, then drop in an application without a doubt. That we have like an interview process there, which is about getting to know the people and understanding their skills and whether it'd be a good fit. So I absolutely apply if something kind of is suitable has come up recently or will come up, or if there's if there is a particular skill set that you have and there's no job advertisement, but you think you just absolutely love to be part of the team, then you need to kind of like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I always got told this when you were looking for jobs when you're younger themselves. It's that case of you need to kick down the door, and it's obviously it's difficult to maybe get hold of like me or Emma or I done these days because unfortunately we just don't always have the time, and because of the amount of spam you get as a founder from people unwelcomed, you have to kind of mute your unsolicited DMs. But there are people within our team that don't, and if you're sending the right types of messages and you're kicking down that door, then you get yourself noticed. And the messages do get passed up the chain, as it were, so to speak, or the question gets asked, this person has been really active. They do this. We had no idea. Do we have this? And sometimes it's a case of, what, sadly, you know, I met an amazing community member recently who kind of did that kicking down the door thing, and they had legal work, the legal expertise, and we kind of have like a whole legal team working for us. And sadly, we don't really need anyone, but I'm aware of that person now, and if there's anything that sort of does come up, or we expand there, or we bring someone in house, then they're going to be at the front of that queue, you know. So yeah, those are the way. That's what I'd recommend. Hope that answers your question.
Totally. And I love the part where you said find the right people to speak to, and they'll pass it up the chain. Pun intended. I
Yeah,
love that.
love it. Yeah, I didn't think of that actually. I wish I were that sharp. I don't have my mind in what's the word, as on it as it used to be, because I'm always quite fried.
Well, it's definitely the result of some amazing work that you've done and been putting in. So,
Appreciate that.
you know,
Thank you very much.
I want to kind of wrap us up here. I know we just have a couple more minutes scheduled, but if you could maybe just give us a shout out of the future of the metaverse. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a really amazing question, because it's like often I have to start by defining the metaverse. I've been on panels recently about the metaverse, a couple of events, and I'll be on another metaverse panel coming up next week. I think it's on metaverse anyway. So often I start by defining it, but I'm just going to talk about the metaverse at a product level for me. And what I mean by that is like what our platform is the metaverse, right? Or it's part of the metaverse, if you like. And it's called the cryptoverse. And the way that I cannot unsee a metaverse that doesn't look like Ready Player One. And the aim for the cryptoverse is to be like Ready Player One. That's how I see it. And I can't unsee that. And, you know, I feel like there is going to be a number of different metaverses which will ultimately link together, interlink, interoperable, or at least offer gateways, portals, whatever you want to call. And our aim is to be a part of that group, you know, the multiverse, so to speak. So it's going to be high quality graphics, Unreal 5. Now Unreal 5 still kind of early doors, but it'll be built in Unreal 4, optimized for Unreal 5 as soon as it's out. Want it to have offer in the future VR when I think VR is ready, because I still think it's a way off. People feel nauseous after 20 minutes there, so I don't think that's going to be the primary focus. But that really high quality. And in terms of aesthetically and stylistically, I almost see it or feel it, from an artistic point of view, of having cyberpunk, sci-fi, and anime infusion from an art direction point of view, where it's like, yes, there's lots of elements of photorealistic, but still that recognition that, this is not the reality that we live in, but having lots of, let's say, high quality, I would just say, experience graphically, but also with like a tint of that kind of anime and sci-fi vibe. So that's what they can expect artistically. From a format perspective, it's going to be persistent. So there's not going to be instanced experiences like, say, for example, Sandbox. It's more akin to Decentraland in terms of that persistent world. There's going to be different zones. I haven't called them districts because Decentraland call them districts, and I know other people have used that. But when I think of a district, I think of this kind of like, I think of what Decentraland is districts. So more like zones, which are styled differently, curated content differently. So we have like an 18 plus adult area, an education zone, game and entertainment. We've got like a cyberpunk and a high culture and art zone, and users will be able to traverse the world via vehicles and transport, or they can try and walk it, but it's bigger than the size of Greater London. So good luck with that. But yeah, that's what to kind of expect. And obviously, I think the only other kind of sort of inkling I can give is that most metaverses have either terraforming, a bit like Fortnite, you're in world and you're shaping the world around you, and then others have like importing of assets from scenes, like Decentraland with the Builder and Vox Edit in Sandbox. Whereas the aim for for the cryptoverse is that it will have the capability for both terraforming and importation, and that the reason for that is so that it offers a user with no dev experience the ability to shape their land and world. But anybody who wants to build and monetize custom experiences like game studios or others, has the capability to do so with more of the sophisticated developer tools.
That is going to be exciting. And hopefully, if we're going towards a Ready Player One experience, it is more like within the metaverse and not like the dystopian humanity outside of the metaverse.
Yeah,
That we want to avoid that. So fingers
absolutely.
crossed we do that the right way. But anyways, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. You're the absolute man. I know you're ridiculously busy running a massive organization. So thank you for taking the time to speak.
Pleasure.
Yeah, you're the best.
Thank you so much.
Any parting words for us?
No, just enjoy, guys. I think we're in for a wild ride, should I say, wild ride in the years to come. I think the metaverse is only going to get bigger. Be a part of it, enjoy it, and come and say hello to our community and get involved if you aren't already. And thank you so much for inviting me along to speak to your community. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, thank you all so much for tuning in. See you on the next episode.